My guest, who is an economic analyst, Bayonle Omoyele, is right here with us. Thank you again for joining us on Business Daily.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Bayonle, I'll just start off by hearing from you, especially from the eyes or from the lens of an economic analyst, which you are. Did you expect the raise that we saw yesterday? I mean, over 150 basis points and over 3 raises so far in the year 2024.
Well, it is expected. In fact, a whole lot of experts actually saw it coming that interest rate is going to be increased. But the question is, to what extent? Is it sustainable? So these are the things we need to take into perspective.
But the CBN governor went on to hint that this just might be the last that we will see in the long run or for a long time. How do you see that comment, especially since we have seen, quite different approach that the CBN has taken, especially this year, 2024? Do you agree that we just might not see another raise in the short term?
Okay, Governor Cardoso said that the major drive for inflation increment is increments in food inflation, right? We have seen that presently the headlights of food inflation is 40.53, which is equally affecting the headlights of inflation, which stand at 33.56 as at the moment. You see, when CBN increases inflation, it's meant to make the interest to be at par with the inflation, or the interest should be higher than the inflation. If the interest is higher than the inflation percentage, it means that you have the perfect economy and a stable economy. But in a period where inflation is higher, what we're experiencing in the country at the moment, when inflation is higher than in interest, you have negative. It means people will not be encouraged to hold Naira as an asset. Now, I said earlier, to what extent? Governor Cardoso said we need to do more in the food sector. Now, we only mention this. We are not putting this into action. And I think that it is high time for government to tell everybody in this country, Operation Go to Farm. I call it Operation GTF, Go to Farm. Now, it is clear and it's a fact that major problem we are having in this country is food. So how do we solve this problem? When we solve this problem, it affects the inflation, it curbs the inflation, it reduces the interest rates. Now let me explain. Now imagine a situation where government tells, government recently introduced or proposed 48,000 as a minimum wage. Of course, it is poor, right? But imagine government now said, okay, for those level 3 to maybe level 6 or level 7, those are the bottom of the pyramid in that sector, take 48,000. Maybe those level 8 upward, we are giving you these amounts of money to venture into agriculture, into farming. Imagine that multiplier effect at a single interest. Imagine a situation when government tells all the senators we have in the country, the 109 senators, all the honorables we have in the country, the 360 honorables, your constitutional projects this year, it is farm. Go to farm. Employ people in your constituencies. Imagine the multiplier effect that is going to have in this country. Imagine a situation where government tells all this government secondary school in Nigeria, government secondary school, primary secondary school, we have a lot of them in the country with massive lands in their school. Go to farm. Government allocate a particular amount of money for these people to farm. Produce what you eat. Imagine what the multiplier effect is going to be on our inflation, on what is going to be on our interest rates. Imagine a situation when government tells all the ministers, you're a minister in this country, go to farm. You must have a farm. You are holding one sector in the government, you must go to farm. Imagine the multiplier effect that is going to have in this country. So I personally think that the monetary policy the CBN is presently using is single, it's it's not sustainable, because imagine that the rate at which people are accessing loan in this country is about 40%. It triples down to the bottom of the pyramid, because when I take loan at 40%, I have to make margin. Okay, my selling rate is going to increase because my buying rate is increased. Okay, so we're all seeing this problem, and I think that one of the ways we're going to solve this problem drastically is for everybody to go to farm, make it everybody's responsibility. And one of the ways government is going to come into this to help these options is to see that the security level of the country is tightened. When the security in the country is tightened, people will be encouraged to do this process and let these loans come to people at single digit interest. Now let me quickly add this. Imagine government says everybody, we have the data, everybody that have a house in this country with a C of O or R of O. If you have R of O, you have C of O, you are entitled to a particular amount of money as loan, using your property as collateral. What you need to do is to farm. Now, we have a lot of households in the country. Imagine we take this loan, we go to farm, all other sectors I've mentioned, go to farm. Imagine the multiplier effect. Now, CBN will no longer bother about too much money in circulation, because the too much money in circulation is a problem for the country at the moment, because too much money in circulation is not meeting the production. So we have a lot of money that we cannot use to buy the products, because the products are lesser than the money. So government have to use that strategy of the DMO to introduce higher interest on savings, higher interest on investment, in order to curb too much money in circulation. But by the time everybody goes to farm, we produce a lot. Too much money in circulation will no longer be a problem, because the too much money in circulation will be able to meet at a par with the products we have in circulation.
Well, interesting solutions right there.
And I think that's going to help the country.
Coming from Bayonle Omoyele. But we still will revisit that point, and we hope that you just hold your thoughts there, because like I said before, we will be revisiting these solutions that you have listed. But for now, let's take a look at excerpts from the meeting, the address by the Central Bank of Nigeria, Governor Chiamaka Doso.
Gentlemen, the Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, held its 295th meeting on the 20th and 21st of May, 2024, to review recent economic and financial developments and assess risks to the outlook. Decisions of the MPC. The committee's decisions are as follows. 1, raise the MPR by 150 basis points to 26.25% from 24.75%. 2, retain the asymmetric corridor around the MPR to plus 100 to minus 300 basis points. 3, retain the cash reserve ratio of deposit money banks at 45%. And 4, retain the liquidity ratio at 30%. Considerations. The key focus of the MPC at this meeting remained to achieve price stability by effectively using tools available to the monetary authority to rein in inflation. Members observed that while year-on-year headline inflation in April 2024 rose moderately, the month-on-month measures of headline, food, and core all declined significantly. This follows a decline month-on-month of headline and food measures in March 2024, suggesting that the recent tight monetary policy stance of the bank is beginning to yield the desired outcomes. The MPC, however, noted that the inflationary pressure continues to be driven largely by food inflation. The committee thus reiterated several challenges confronting the effective moderation of food inflation.
You're still watching Business Daily coming to you on Trust Television, and that was an excerpt from the just concluded Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Chiamaka Doso, the central bank governor, addressing the media at the end of that meeting. But I still have my guest who is here to analyze the decision from that meeting. Bayonle Omoyele, who is an economic analyst, is still right here with me. So thank you again for coming on the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
There was something you said before the break. You said the CBN has continuously, taking a single approach towards addressing inflation. Can you, expatiate on that point? I am very interested, particularly because you talked about, the one approach that we have seen so far, and that is raising interest rate.
Yes, you see, in economics, when you solve a problem, there are 100% probability to create another problem. Okay, so what government look into is when we're trying to solve a problem, they look at the potentials of the problem being solved and the problems that is going to be created. If the potentials of the problem being solved is greater in value than the problem that will be created, it is good to go. Now, coming to CBN increments, it has been increased from 18.75 to 20.75, from 20.75 to 24.75, 24.75 to 26.25. Now, the effect is on the cost of purchase, on the cost of doing business in the country. So I'm starting from the effects. The cost of doing business in the country is going to be skyrocketed because those businesses that take loan would take that loan from commercial bank at a higher interest. Commercial banks buy from CBN at that rate. Now I'm using 26.25. You are CBN, I'm commercial bank. Hey, I get 1 million from CBN at 26.25. That is about 260,000 something figures. I'll say to my customer at a margin, maybe at 40%. So it means that if customer A comes to my bank to take a loan of that same 1 million, customer A is getting it at 400,000, which is 40%. Now, when customer A gets to the shop or the business where it operates, customer A will now look at, oh, I've taken a loan at 40%. Oh, my staff, this is my operation overheads and all, add up to that money and probably sell to the grassroots at maybe 70% margin. I'm using that as an example. So that means those at the bottom of the pyramid are those feeling the heat of this interest the more. And some businesses that might not be able to accommodate such an operational burden will not be able to access facilities from CBN.
I was going to go to that, the impact it would have in the area of access to credit and businesses now that usually, would want to expand and approach the banks for loans. What impact is this going to have on these businesses?
You and I know that it is difficult for a business to survive without taking a loan. In fact, there's a part of business theory that talk about even if you have the capital for a particular project or for a particular business, don't use your capital, use the loan. And when you take the loan, it pushes you to do more in terms of the business. But now people will find it difficult to access these facilities because it is expensive. And when it is expensive, how do you meet up? Another thing that equally, form parts of this operational burden is the infrastructure deficit we have in the country. We talk of the cost of petroleum that that skyrocketed the cost of transport. Okay, so all these are operational burdens people at the bottom of the pyramids are going to experience. And let me tell you the truth this morning. The cost, I told somebody the other day that the cost of living is killing the living. No, government needs to understand that the cost of living is killing the living. And how is this so? Is because these interest rates, from this perspective of how it affects us, it's killing the business people in the country. It's discouraging people from doing business in the country.
Well, is it all negative? Because in the words of the CBN governor, the MPC's decision is an aggressive attempt to tame inflation. And this is expected to also trickle down to the common man on the street, isn't it?
Let's talk about when we had a stable economy. It was before COVID. We talk about the period between May 2019 and April 2020 was when we have a stable economy. That period, our interest rates and inflation was almost at par. So that period, we have a stable economy. But of course, we cannot blame government too much because nobody saw COVID-19 coming. But when COVID-19 came, everything changed. A lot of countries changed their approach towards maintaining economic stability. And what I'm telling you this morning is government using monetary policy of interest rates alone will not solve the problem. And you can see the effect. Since this interest rate has been increasing, as inflation rate reduces, so we need to answer. Inflation increased recently to 33.69. Okay, but government is now saying that it's going to get better. But I think, and I want to say this to CBN and to the MPC this morning, that they should give us a timeline and a measurable figure. Now, what I mean is this. Okay, you came out to address Nigerians that, oh, we are working on this is going to get better. Now give us, what interest rates are we targeting? What inflation percentage are we targeting? So that we can track your success. Nobody pays for processes. We want to get results. Let's track your results. Let's track what you're able to achieve with this process. And I'm saying it to you this morning that the problem we have in this country is not what a singular approach can solve. It has to be multidimensional.
At this point, Mr. Bayonle, one thing that crosses my mind is you've mentioned as to how the CBN has, constantly used a singular approach towards taming inflation, which over time we've seen hasn't, given the successes that were expected. So what other approaches would you suggest? We're talking about the multidimensional approaches.
I was so happy when the governors made it clear, which of course we all know, that the major problem that constitutes the inflation increments is food. Now, we all know that food is a problem. So how do we solve this? Number one is the insecurity. Government have to come in, invest heavily, and I think that government, have to introduce private organization tactics. Okay, one of the private organization tactics is to put into account successes of all agencies. Okay, I employed you or I appointed you to do a particular thing for me. At the end of Mondays, on weekly basis, or maybe every month, you should be able to, to get across to me with your reports, tell me what you have been able to achieve, tell me your challenges, tell me what you need from me to get better. So I think when government takes all the militaries, all these agencies in charge of the security of this company into account on monthly basis, I think that will give us a level of productivity and ensures that they are doing what they're supposed to do. And even if they're not the one they're supposed to do, let them go and appoint somebody else. So when appointees sees that the government is not joking about the level of their performances, maybe on weekly basis or monthly basis, I think everybody is going to sit up and ensure that they do what they're supposed to do. So we need to tighten the insecurity of this country. That is number one. Then number two, we have seen a situation where recently, we all know, fuel was the subsidy was removed, which caused the increments in the cost of fuel. Now, government have justifications for this, but I think government has not done justice by giving us shock absorbers to this, which of course affects transportation of food. I buying food from a state A and I want to move it to state B. Initially, when cost of fuel was maybe less than 200 naira, of course it's going to be cheaper. But now cost of fuel is more than 600. That is almost 300% increment. If the transportation used to be 1,000, it will jump, it will now be around maybe 3,000 plus. This affects the cost of that good. And when that food items or that goods gets to destination, of course, it's going to increase. Recently somebody bought pepper, and I was counting it. Maybe 4 or 5 peppers at 200 naira. I wanted to cry. That what is going on in this country, and the purchasing power is not increasing, and that is why these people, the NLC and TUC, told government that they want a living wage, not a minimum wage.
But one thing that has been a concern for most people is that these aggressive hikes, might trample the economy in terms of growth, in terms of GDP growth. But how can the government at this point, balance taming inflation and also, sustaining economic growth? Because those are the major concerns that have been raised since this news broke out.
See, the two must work consecutively. One must not be left out for the other. The two policies must work together. As CBN is working hard to tame the inflation by increasing interest rates, the other factors that are causing the inflation to increase must be tackled aggressively. And like I mentioned, the food, which is the major item that is causing this inflation to increase, must be tackled. And like I told you, some suggestion I have that everybody, we must go to farm. Operation Go to Farm. Operation Go to Farm. You and I, we must be ready to farm. Now, it's so appalling that it's so bad that even a crate of egg is 4,000. You see, how are we going to survive? So government needs to come in an holistic and aggressive way. We have identified the problem. Let's solve it.
Coming into office, Yemi Cardoso had said that the CBN was returning to its original, responsibilities. I mean, in the past, we had seen the previous CBN governor do the job of the monetary as well as the fiscal side of government. But he had said we are going back to, status quo. And that brings us to conversations around the Federal Ministry of Finance, the fiscal side generally. Are you seeing synergy between monetary and fiscal sides, towards addressing inflation? Because the CBN cannot do everything, like
To be honest, there is a committee in CBN where Ministry of Finance has a representative where they discuss the monetary and the fiscal. But to be honest, I'm not actually saying it because the fiscal policies are much of the executive. That is the government that needs to be done in order to curb the inflation. And like I said, now let's look at this. One of the ways you can use fiscal policies to curb inflation is government expenditure. Now, when government increases its expenditures, there will be money in circulation. Okay, people will have access to the job, employment opportunities, and all. But how do we treat this in the government? Now, government needs to stop rubbing it on people's faces about their lavish lifestyle. And I quote, the vice president cost of building, is luxurious. And I think that government needs to look into such things like that. These are the things people, a layman, people at the bottom of the pyramid sees and say that, no, this country is not working. We are saying that we should endure. We are saying that we should endure with your government. The government is going to get better. And you, on the other side, you are living this, this flamboyant lifestyle, which I think that is one of the reasons why the TUC and the likes are asking for a living wage, because we cannot be suffering while you and the other side, you're doing well for yourself. We have seen a situation where government, send the children to school abroad, to have a better life, while we are here in Nigeria trusting that things is going to get better. Okay, so if we're in this game together, everybody needs to be fighting this together. So don't rub your success on us. And that is why I said that the fiscal policies is not really working the way it's supposed to be. And I need to commend the government for for saying that the cybersecurity levy should not be implemented at the moment. And I think it's a very good one, because it's part of fiscal policy strategies, to use taxations to, to stabilize the economy. So when that came on board, I hear lots of Nigerians say no to that, and I think that that is a very good justification on the part of the government. But for the fiscal policies to complement the monetary policies, what I said earlier, the operation Go to Farm needs to be implemented. We need to invest in what we eat. And now there's another in Yoruba that says that it means that if I no longer think about what I'm going to eat, I'm not a poor person. So if feeding is no longer my problem, I will think right.
That's if you have the basics.
If I have the basics.
Things as little as food, then you're good. But before we go, unfortunately our time is far gone. What impact will this have on investors' confidence? Does this in any way, signal a case of inconsistencies in our policies? Or what exactly would this, what kind of message would this pass, talking about the interest rate hike?
If you're an investor, the question I want to ask you is, at the state Nigeria is at the moment, will you invest in Nigeria?
Well, it depends on the sector we're talking about.
Okay. Now, holistically, it will be very difficult for an investor to invest in this country because of some policies that cannot be preempted. Okay. If your economy is not stable, it will be very difficult for someone to invest, because they cannot really define what's going to happen in the next 5 years, what's going to happen in the next 10 years. And that is why I said federal government, CBN needs to give us a timeline, give us in numbers. Let this process be measurable. If we are curbing inflation, let's know the percentage you are looking at. Okay, we want to drive inflation to 10%. Everybody knows that, oh, we are driving inflation to 10%. Oh, the interest rate will be 12%, which I think is better if inflation rate is at 10%. Everybody knows that, oh, what we are driving towards is inflation is for interest rates to get at 12%. So it has to be measurable. When it is measurable, it is definable. When it is definable, investors can preempt, investors can forecast what they will get as return on their investment in a particular period of time.
So the bottom line is we need a timeline.
We need a timeline.
To what state changes.
Yes, we need a timeline. And also, we need government to invest in food. Okay? I keep hammering on food. And I told you, let me quickly recap of what I said earlier, the solutions. Those that have houses in this country with R of O or C of O, it is from government. Government should use that as collateral to give them access to funds that they will use to go to farm.
Well said there, Bayonle Omoyele, who is an economic analyst, talking about Nigerians producing what we eat. And like you stated, food is a basic requirement for survival, and therefore Nigerians should have that. Thank you again for all the insight on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, this is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of Business Daily. Join the conversation on social media and let us hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the increase of interest rate by the Central Bank of Nigeria? My name is Chiamaka Enendu. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.